As per request, next up on the list is Jeritza. But what is the most OP build you can make for Jeritza in Fire Emblem 3 Hopes? Jeritza was interesting. There was multiple ways I wanted to go with this build, but ultimately decided on a really fitting theme. The build is filled with irony, and I knew this might be the only chance I had to create this particular build. So without further ado, I give you Jeritza the Immortal. Jeritza gets a very special class, the Death Knight. This class is similar to Dark Knight, but not quite the same. Obviously, this gives us an opportunity to create a unique character, so Death Knight it is. Our weapon is a plus 100 Lance of Zoltan with boost combat art / magic and boost critical level 3. If you don't have a Lance of Zoltan with these attributes, use any weapon that has them. It doesn't have to be a Lance of Zoltan, but boosting the combat magic and critical is very important for this build. The boost combat magic is very powerful in this build, because the entire build is built around you one-shotting enemy commanders with your spells. Boost critical 3 is usually pretty amazing all on its own, but Jeritza has a very special use for it, which we'll get to in a little bit. For our accessory, we want to run Asclepius again. If you're already using it on someone else or you don't have it, no worries, just use a magic staff. Jeritza's defense and resistance stats are pretty similar, so ultimately, I picked Cavalry because the Holy Knights and the Dark Knights would likely have a higher resistance stat in battle. I would have chosen Tomes again, but I always do that, so it's time to pick something a little different. Our combat magic needs a bit of an explanation. We're running Death and we're running Nosferatu. You're probably wondering why I didn't pick stronger spells. For you to understand the reasoning, I'll explain one of Jeritza's unique abilities. Murderous Intent greatly increases the crit rate when attacking enemies above 80% health. Most of the strongest spells in the game hit multiple times. The problem with that is you lose your crit after the enemy drops below 80%, so we need spells that hit once. This ensures that every attack will proc Murderous Intent. Death specifically hits really hard in this build, and believe it or not, so does Nosferatu. But Nosferatu has another role. This puts the Immortal in Jeritza's name. Without the ability to heal, this build will eat up all of your health. You're gonna see why in just a moment. Jeritza has 3 unique abilities. Quietus is an instant kill for non-commander enemies. The gauge mainly fills from attacking normally. I'm not a big fan of this ability, nor does it get activated very much due to the gameplay loop. Murderous Intent was the ability I mentioned earlier that greatly boosts our crit when attacking enemies above 80% health. And then Obliteration increases your damage by 50% when ordered to attack. As for the class abilities, we have Deadly Scythe, which grants a rare chance that our magic instantly defeats non-commander units. This applies to combat arts too, but since we're not using any, it only applies to our magic. And Swordbuster, which gives us an 100% boost against swords. Now as for our abilities, this is where you're going to understand the decisions at play. Keep in mind, I will be telling you where I got all of these abilities at the end of the video. Lance Prowess 3 gives us a 30% boost when using lances. Impossible Feat greatly increases our damage when above 25% health. The downside though, is it causes us to sustain damage for a limited time. Arm's Thrift reduces the durability on our spells. Wild Abandon greatly increases damage to enemies, but also greatly increases the damage received by enemies. Life Force greatly increases damage dealt by combat arts and magic, but we sustain damage with each use in proportion to might. So as you can see, we have 3 abilities so far that increase our damage by a crazy amount at the cost of our health. This is one of the biggest reasons we're using Nosferatu as one of our spells. Battle Instinct increases both the warrior gauge and awakening gauge fill rate until one of them is completely full. Burst of Resolve restores awakening with each crit. Keep in mind that Murderous Intent and crit chance level 3 on our weapon means we're critting like 90% of the time. Life Taker restores HP when an enemy commander is defeated. This is important because sometimes Nosferatu's heal isn't enough to keep us topped off. If you get an unlucky string of casts, you may find yourself at very low health before long. Life Taker makes it so between your spell and this ability, you should not be able to die. Apex Lance is super important for this build because it boosts your crit damage. And since our crit is so high, boosting the damage is super important. Finally, Forethought restores the awakening gauge when using your magic. The gameplay loop is very simple. You start off with a death cast to one-shot the first enemy commander you see, and then you use Nosferatu for the next one. Keep alternating spells as you bounce from commander to commander. The biggest disadvantage of this build is your range. This build is designed to one-shot commanders, not to defeat enemies around them. Sure, you're gonna get some kills here and there, but the range is so small on these spells that you're often gonna miss a lot of the surrounding enemies. We have so much damage and so much crit stacking on this character that I would say it's likely the hardest hitting character in the entire game. As promised, let me go over where I got each ability real quick to save you some time on your grind. Lance prowess is gained through Soldier, Cavalier, and Paladin. Impossible Feat is from Dark Bishop, Arms Thrift from Archer, and Wild Abandon from Brigand. Life Force is from Mage. Battle Instinct from Bonite, Burst of Resolve, and Forethought are both from Trickster. Life Taker from Dark Mage, and Apex Lances from Paladin. If you're looking for a class with more range, you might want to click the Sylvain video on the screen. Sylvain is the master of combos and range. Seriously, the range you get on this build hits everything in sight. If you like my builds, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you have any characters you would like to see, let me know in the comment section. I have an ongoing list that changes based on character demand. Enjoy the build and enjoy breaking Fire Emblem 3 hopes even more.